Welcome to what is a celebration of Tamaara Danish Tabb's life. No condolences are necessary. She would have been over 98 today had she still been with us and lived a wonderful, full life, as you all know. And the way the day is going to go is a number of family and friends will be speaking, each of them for 2.5 to 3 minutes. And we know that they will be very scrupulous about that.
Why are they laughing?
Yes. We will have interludes of singing that Jonathan will kibitz throughout the program, but will also, along with his daughter Sarah Minna-Gordon, will be doing some singing of songs that Tommy liked and that may remind some of you of her. Afterwards, we invite you all to stay for refreshments and to chat informally. I thought I would begin by reading a few of the emails we got from really all over the world, phone calls from Israel and emails from Prague and Budapest and Paris. Tommy and I had friends really all over the country and the world. I'm just going to read a few to give a flavor of people remembering her. This is from Lauren Poole, who's in California. Indeed, Tommy was a great asker of questions and a great listener to answers. One of the most special things about her was her vast curiosity about things personal, as well as about so many aspects of the world around her. How many hundreds of clippings did she mail me? That was one of her ways of sharing that curiosity with her loved ones. I feel so very fortunate to have been part of her circle of family and friends. She was a mother figure to me, too. Her heart was huge, her family expansive. She embodied the truth that there is always room for more love. That's from Lauren. From Japan, Mama Diagni, who helped take care of Hai in his last year, and who, like everyone else who ever encountered Tommy, was involved, and Tommy was involved in her life. Tommy helped her with school, immigration matters. Mami is now married and living in Japan, where she just had a daughter. When I first sent out the announcement of Tommy's death, her answer was, "This is hard, my best friend, a mother to me." From France, peace to Tommy, I am sad. Bruno and Laura are going to write you. I do not speak English. Yours sincerely, Colette. Tommy and I communicated and talked to people in all sorts of languages. From children of friends in the former Yugoslavia, my parents Vesna and Miloslav, I've CC'd my sister Andrea. We first visited Tommy and Hai in the 70s during their trip to the United States, after our family moved from Belgrade, and then on about reminiscences with Tommy and Hai on what was called the Acres or the Hill, their country place, which all the people they met in Europe, I mean, all of them were invited to come visit, and many of them, in fact, did. From neighbors, from people in her exercise class who felt they'd known her forever after, you all know these things, so I needn't do more. Let me go through the order of speaking of the people who will formally be, I say formally only because family and friends got their dibs in before some of the rest of you family and friends. And so they will be speaking for, as I say, 2.5 to 3 minutes each. And after Johnny does the Kaddish at the end, we will go into a silence, and out of the silence, anybody who would like to speak and share reminiscences about Tommy is welcome to do so. After that, we will end with a rousing chorus of Union Made, and then have informal chat over refreshments. There are sandwiches, there's wine and soft drinks. Okay, so the order is this. We are starting, Sarah, Minna, where are you? Why don't you come up, because you and your father will be singing Power and Glory, which was one of the songs Tommy liked to hear them sing. Then neighbors, and please pay attention to the order, those of you who are going to do your 2.5 minutes. If it takes you more than 2.5 minutes to get up here, we will just go on to the next person. So after the initial singing, Ralph and Ola Della Cava, who live across the hall from Tommy's apartment, will be speaking individually or in some combination, as a number of couples may or may not do. Then Gwen, who lives next door to Tommy and is also a very long-time friend. Then we move to extended relatives and family. Kay is here. You will be talking after Gwen. Let me just go through it, and then if anybody misses their cue, you can cue them. Then Jean and Eric Tabb, then Prexy Nesbitt. If exhaustion or something sets in by then, a rousing Viva la Concebrigada from the Spanish Civil War will be sung in lusty fashion, followed by Katie Tabb speaking, then Sarah Minna Gordon. Johnny will do his time then, followed by Donna, followed by Marnie, followed by the Kaddish, the Silence, Union Maid, and then social time. And Johnny will keep everybody moving along so that it is, yeah, right. But when he talks, if it goes too long, I want to hear. Okay, Sarah, please.
You should have a booklet that has a very cute picture. Thank you. A very cute picture of Tommy. Actually, this was a Scrabble game that she played at my mom's apartment with Daniel and David Kahn and me. Actually, that was that day. So if you turn to the very last page of your booklet, just for a moment, not looking at the amazing biography, you'll see the power and the glory. Please sing along. Come on and take a walk with me through this green and growing land. Walk through the meadows and the mountains and the sand. Walk through the valleys and the rivers and the plains. Walk through the sun and walk through the rain. For here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. Oh, her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Her glory shall rest on us all. From Colorado, Kansas, and the Carolinas to Virginia and Alaska
This is called Mrs. Tabb's door. There's a photo of it going around the room. Google it. Link into LinkedIn. Gaze into a crystal ball. But if you really want to know about Mrs. Tabb, simply behold her apartment door. And while no one likes labels, those labels affixed to her door are a roadmap to her beliefs, a witness to her myriad charities, and a window on her soul. Of the three great threats that humanity faces today, nuclear war, environmental degradation, worldwide epidemics, she was unequivocal. First, a fixation. War is not the answer. War, a weapon of mass deception. And when it comes to planet Earth, her door declared, Greenpeace, conserve, keep it wild, save the whales, save the paradise forests, save the Amazon, save the Arctic, and dear to old and me, save the bees. We're beekeepers upstate. And insofar as taking a stand against epidemics and in favor of people's health, that door roared, healthcare now, Obamacare. Is another world possible? Protesters in Hamburg this past Friday affirmed it was, and militants ever since the First World Social Forum in Porto Alegre in 2002 promise us they'll bring it about. And Tamaara, I have no doubt, would have been among their ranks. To bring about that better world, two critical conditions are indispensable. Freedom, real freedom, freedom from ignorance, disease, and poverty, freedom from racism and sexism. And of course, the other condition, equality. On these demands, her door pointed the way. I refuse to surrender my freedom, and Amnesty International would help ensure that, as well as the ACLU. And as to equality, it says, the 1% doesn't speak for me, and the 99% say it all about equality. Tamaara also knew that only action, hers, mine, and yours, could bring about that better world. In that she was practical, grasping the few tools the current system still leaves at our disposal. I vote, unions and jobs, tax the rich, protect Medicare, protect Social Security. One last thought. Our grandkids stand in awe of that door and to be sure of Tamaara. It's not every day you can visit a neighbor and without ever knocking or crossing a threshold, you end up educating the next generation into their birthright of freedom, equality, and militance simply by beholding that door.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tommy's next door neighbor, Gwendolyn Simmons, and I'm just honored to have been asked to say a few words. And I know it has to be a few words, otherwise the old Apollo Theater hook is going to come and grab me and take me away from here, huh? What do you say about Tommy? And my neighbor, Ralph, just did it magnificently. I do know what not to say about Tommy, what adjectives to not use. That's from a conversation I had with her earlier this year. And she made it very clear to me, not that I had made the mistake of using any of these adjectives, but she made it clear, and I don't know how it came up, she detested words or adjectives like feisty, with it, lucid to describe her and others like her. So I thought I understood where she was coming from, but I said, so is it that you find those words demeaning or condescending? unintentionally, because if people say that, I'm sure they don't mean it, you know, in a condescending or demeaning way, or it's just too pedestrian, and she looked at me and smiled and said, all of the above. Did I say it? I met Tommy 22 years ago when I moved next door to her. And I think I learned early on that I was a very lucky lady. And here was somebody that I would feel comfortable with, somebody smart, somebody curious, and we'll talk about that later. And, okay, I'll get this together here. And somebody with whom I would be on pretty much the same wavelength politically. So we talked about a lot of things, and as Ralph has let us all know visually and orally, her door represented Tommy. And that was one of the first things that struck me. And we talked about books, we talked about problems, international, national. We laughed, we shared theater dates together, concerts, and I just wish there were more of them because Tommy was often very, very busy, and I was busy too. But we managed to get together and hang out, or just go for lunch in the neighborhood. But I was always learning something about her, and always considering myself quite fortunate to know her. You know, we're all very multi-layered, and even people close to us don't always know all the layers, whether that's our choosing or whatever. And I didn't think of Tommy as somebody really emotional, but in terms of well, let me start that again. Sharing a lot of deep feelings, but we did have occasions where she shared a lot and I felt privileged. And I remember, I think it was about a year or two ago, somehow we began talking about death. And we both said we were not afraid of it. We, of course, didn't want to suffer, but so be it. But we weren't afraid. We didn't know what happened, and we didn't really care after death. we admitted that to each other. But one thing that sort of struck with me, I'm losing my place here with my notes, but somehow we wandered into talking about Khalil Gibran, and how when I was introduced to him in college by a friend, and she, of course, had found him before that. She's a little bit more chronologically gifted than I, and I'm chronologically gifted. And so we talked about the fact that being young, we wrapped ourselves in his stuff, and then as we got older, we felt that maybe he was a little too rhetorical, particularly in his poetry, not so much stories, because he did write a few stories. And then we kind of come full circle, and there were things about him we were embracing again. And it made me think about this passage. I'll just read a passage from The Prophet. This is an adaptation, it's an excerpt of an adaptation of his passage on death. In The Prophet, and it just says, if you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. And I think that says Tommy. That's really Tommy. She was open, she was alive, always. And so let us be joyful that she was in our lives. We had that gift, and that whether or not she was a family member or a good friend or a casual acquaintance, we were very fortunate to have known her. I learned a lot from her, and maybe through her many questions, she learned a couple of things from others. Anybody who knows her well knows where I'm coming from with that. About a year ago, I'll end with this. About a year ago, kind fact, out of the blue, Tommy, we were just sitting around chatting, and she said, you know, some people say I ask a lot of questions.
No.
And she said, do you think I ask a lot of questions? I was kind of surprised that she even asked that of me. So I said, well, yeah, sometimes. And I said, do you think you ask a lot of questions? And she looked at me, kind of reared back and said, hold it. I'm the only one around here who gets to ask questions. Thank you. And let's applaud Tommy.
Picture a building that is shaped, when you're standing in front of it, like an upside down backwards L. So people who lived in 1514 entered on the street door, but to get to 1516, you had to go walk on the side of the building. There was grass and flowers between the sidewalk and the building itself, but this nice walkway, and people could enter the apartments for 1516 at where the L would turn. I have two instant memories that came flooding back the minute I heard that Tommy was gone. One was, as a kid growing up, you begin to realize in time that there's certain things that mark a day that means that life is going on as it should, how it begins, the middle of it, who you see when you get home, how things go at night. Picture a high heel shoe, a tall heel about that thick around. The evening was coming to a close when you could hear these footsteps on the sidewalk on the side of the building. The high heel shoe belonged to Tommy, and she had the heaviest footsteps anyone ever knew. And from the second floor, inside, I could hear it outside and say, the evening's coming to a good close, Tommy's home. The other memory that came to me was from college days. My sister and I went to a small college in Hiram, Ohio, Hiram College, that between the end of winter quarter and the start of spring quarter, during a week, the choir went on tour. And one year we were going to be in New York, and Prexy, our cousin, oldest cousin, was a student at Antioch College, and he was on the work section of his studies in New York. And so we told him that we would have all day Monday to run around in New York. So we sang at a church in Fair Lawn, New Jersey on Sunday night, and then Monday the two big buses brought us in and dropped us off in front of the UN, and we were told at 4 o'clock, be here, because the buses will pull up, whoever's there gets on, and then the buses leave, and anyone who's not there, forget it. I had a roommate on the college tour who was from a small town in Ohio. My sister and I were the only black students in the choir. And Louisa from Southern Ohio was standing in front of the UN, and as people dispersed and Karen and I were waiting for Prexy to arrive, I suddenly realized Louisa was just standing there looking petrified. I said, Louisa, what are you going to do? She said, just wait for the buses. I said, Louisa, you want to come with Karen and me? We're waiting for our cousin, and then we're going to go meet an aunt downtown. So she gratefully said yes. And when Prexy arrived, we then all went down to Tommy's office, and Tommy said, let me introduce you to my boss. And so he came out, and Tommy said, I want you to meet my nephew and my nieces. And Louisa's eyes went. And then we went to lunch at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. And we all were looking at our menus and making our choices. And when the waiter got to Louisa, Louisa said, I can't eat any of this. And Tommy said, what do you mean you can't eat any of this? She said, I've never eaten foreign food. Foreign food will never pass my lips. Tommy said, listen, order chop suey, that's a dish Chinese restaurateurs made for Americans. It's not a real Chinese dish. And Louisa said, no, she couldn't. So Tommy said, you're gonna sit here and not eat anything while the rest of us eat? And Louisa said, yes. When the waiter brought our food, he also bought a McDonald's hamburger for Louisa because he realized that Louisa was in culture shock. And Tommy was the one who made it a less embarrassing, less difficult experience for Louisa in terms of how she chatted with her. So those are two fond memories that I have of Tommy.
This is a great honor to be here. To talk about a woman I hardly knew. I sort of feel like the Elijah at the family Passover Seder. You know, the one person who comes in who people don't quite know and what are they doing there? But I had the opportunity to meet Tommy for really just a few minutes. I am so honored to be here with Bill and with Donna, with Prexy. And I know we come from, all of us, a larger family that Tommy so deeply appreciated. Even seeing that her brother was born in Kharkov, where my grandparents were from, is quite amazing to me. But I just thought I'd share two things. One is the poem that Donna wrote in February, which told me first about who Tommy was in just one way, before I met her. Donna wrote, every morning at 7:30, the alarm shakes her from uneasy dreams, calls her to the kitchen with her cane to pour her cereal, settle in, keep the date she's kept for 16 years for breakfast with Amy. At 97, my father's cousin turns up the TV volume, nods in commentary, conversation, encourages young men, old women on the front lines from Standing Rock to Western Sahara. Together, she and the journalists she has never met cross continents, oceans, salvage stories from shacks, shadows, streets, occupied territories, amplify voices denied their destiny who refused to surrender. And that so deeply touched me that Tommy was out there, that we were actually having breakfast together every morning. Now, I got to meet her after her coma, after she sort of went out of commission for a bit and then came to. And Donna told me about Tommy, and so I came on up here. And what a moment it was. When I said I'd like to take a picture of her, and I still have this picture, she went like this. And we had a long conversation, and what she has given to so many people, being a part of so many different struggles. I thought I would end with a variation of a poem that many of you, I'm sure, have already heard by Mary Elizabeth Fry, with a few little changes. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I'm 1,000 clippings of news on the 2-letter Scrabble words that only I use. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift questioning push to anyone I meet. How are you making the world a better place for everyone, no matter their economic status, gender, or race? Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.
Amy, you're a hard act to follow. Well, like a lot of neurotic kids growing up in New York, I had two parents who were real works. I'm talking about my natural parents, Hi and Barbara. And when I met Tommy, it was so refreshing because Tommy didn't have all that garbage of the past that I had to deal with. It was like a new relationship. And one of the greatest things I got through Tommy was a new family, or families. I had the Nesbitts and I had the Gordons. And one of the things that was kind of special about Tommy is how she was genuinely interested and engaged with my friends I brought to the house. She stayed in touch with them over the years. She even stayed in touch with my first wife after we were separated. And that's happened with other relationships, in and out of the family. And that's about all I have to say.
So I've been thinking about Tommy in terms of the love she gave. And I was thinking of Iris Murdoch's definition of love, which I think is great. It's love is the exceptionally difficult realization that something other than self exists. And I saw Tommy do that again and again with whether or not she was buying peanut butter at the local store or talking to good friends or family members. And also, she showed this love even in difficult times. And I'm thinking of one incident where we did have a difficult time with each other. And that was when she was visiting us in Seattle once, and we were, just the two of us were at this beautiful park, and we were overlooking Puget Sound. It was a gorgeous, sunny day. And we saw the mountains in the distance, and Tommy started asking questions. She asked, why are they called the Olympics? Who named them that? Which mountaintop is that? I expected me to know the names of each peak, and where was the ferry going, and what was that town over there, etc. And I had kind of expected to just kind of experience the beauty and blissful ignorance, you know? And so I said at one point to Tommy, I said, enough already. I said, it's really hard for me to experience this, and I don't know all the answers, and you're asking me too many questions. And her response was wonderful. Instead of becoming defensive, which I probably would have done, I would have said stuff like, oh, this is my way of connecting with you, and I want to know about Puget Sound, and I want to know what your life is like, and everything. A million different things she could have said. She said nothing. She was silent. And it was not an angry silent or, annoyed with me or anything. It was like she really succeeded in that exceptionally difficult realization that something other than herself existed, even in difficult conversations. And I've learned from her, and she's my model for this, that I hope that someday I can succeed in the way she did with her love.
I usually don't have any trouble speaking. I think at one point I measured that I'd given something like 700 speeches in a 2-year period organizing against apartheid. As some people here know, I was quite involved with that for a number of years. I find myself really, I don't really know what to say, because in front of you right now is not just me. Tommy was so much a part of my family, all of whom are dead, that in front of you is my sister, my mother, my father. And I don't know what I can say to adequately share with you how much Tommy was part of our lives. I've written things in the things you can read about Tommy and Jonathan's father, Gil Gordon, and their role in helping us to move onto the West Side. That involves things like getting my father out of jail. Because I can remember distinctly the police arresting my father for just walking into a grocery store because he didn't look like sort of black bourgeoisie, and my father never wanted to look like that. And as a result, he had a lot of stuff that happened to him all the time that I now know about and that you all know about too, because now these police will blow you away without hesitating. Tommy understood all those things. She fought for him. She never stopped fighting for them. And I think that's the one thing that I am most grateful to Tommy for. That, as with my parents and my sister, I can't stop ever fighting. For one thing, Tommy would ask me about 1,000 questions as to why I stopped fighting. But for another reason, for Tommy, fighting was love. Trying to change this damn thing that we're in, and it was her way of loving in a way that's so profound that I think it's very few of us that are able to do that. Sometimes she drove me nuts because she could ask some questions and never, ever stopped. She particularly drove me nuts about my relationships with different women. Oh, buddy. You see Bill over there trying to get away with a slicky. See, that's called getting away with a slicky. We're all one family. And that's the legacy that I think Tommy would want us to keep. It's a family that has no boundaries. It has no limits. It has no color. It has no age. It has no ending. It is a verb, this family. Thank you all very much.
The Spanish Civil War was part of our family's DNA. My parents met when Tommy's sister, Deborah, my mother, went to my father and asked him if he would speak about the Spanish Civil War, and we all know that High fought in that war, and this is a great tune, so you're all going to sing it, right? Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la quinta brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Che sea coberta de gloria, Emanuela, Emanuela. Che sea coberta de gloria, Emanuela, Emanuela. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Luchamos contra los moros, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Per sanare antifascistas, Emanuela, Emanuela. Per sanare antifascistas, Emanuela, Emanuela. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Solo es nuestro deseo, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Acabar con el fascismo, Emanuela, Emanuela. Acabar con el fascismo, Emanuela, Emanuela. En el frente de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. En el frente de Jarama, rumba la rumba la rumba la. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, Emanuela. No tenemos ni aviones, ni tanques, ni cañones, Emanuela. la quinte brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la, que sea cubierta de gloria, Emanuela, Emanuela, que sea cubierta de gloria, Emanuela, Emanuela, viva.
I want to say a few words about this booklet, which you will find in the baskets over there, and you can pick up if you like, if you are a Scrabble player, which I assume everyone here is, since you all knew Tommy. I just want to read the introduction to explain what this is. Sarah Minna and I put this together. So just on your first page, if you have it. Tommy learned to play Scrabble while working in Chicago with the ILGWU. Ted Rich introduced her, and it was love at first play. Already an anagrams player, she had finally found her game. Tommy took equal delight in beautiful words and high scores, her own and those of her competitors. She looked for good Scrabble words everywhere, circling interesting ones in articles and jotting them down on notepads. We have a sample here from an article about cuisine in India with words like gutka and scourge circled. She distributed ever-evolving lists of 2- and 3-letter words to family and friends so that their games might benefit. Many of you have those. But in case you don't, we've included them all here. Not all of these are real words, but I will forevermore hold them sacred and insist on them when I play Scrabble, as you should as well. But what I wanted to draw your attention to briefly is at the end here, the last page is a scan. Sarah and I have begun the arduous task of going through Tommy's apartment, and we found a massive folder. By the way, there's probably a folder with every one of your names on it. There's also one with Scrabble on it. And in there was about maybe, 30 pieces of paper like this with good Scrabble words, lists of good Scrabble words. And what I wanted to draw your attention to, well, first of all, just the enthusiasm with which some of these words are written. So boson is a particle, exclamation mark. Haboob is a dust storm in Arabic. And ganja, aka weed, M-dash, religious use. So, as you may know, to be a truly excellent Scrabble player, you do not actually need to know any of these meanings. And to me, it was just interesting that even though what you really need to play good Scrabble is memorization and a sense of how words are put together, for Tommy, the meanings were very important. And this to me really characterizes something about her that was very important to me. This is true for all of us too. Many of you are here because your names were in one of her many email lists that were divided up by topic. As you might have noticed, you get New York Times articles on given topics like cats or Jews or Chicago, and then or science. You get a lot if you're on the science list. But we weren't just names. I think, as has been clear in other people's remarks, she was very interested in people's meanings as well, and people have described that kind of uncomfortable but also kind of nice feeling of being probed by Tommy as she tried to access your meaning. And I think she never got as much as she wanted from any of us by way of meanings. I think we never got as much as we wanted from her. I certainly didn't. So I think if Tommy's memory is to be a blessing, and this builds on things other people have said, I imagine it to be a kind of aspirational sort of blessing. May we feel as she did. May we fight as she did in that particular way that Prexy explained for us. May we keep our eyes as open as hers. May we be as much of a blessing to others as she will be. Thank you.
That was Katie, or Catherine Tabb, Tommy's granddaughter. I am Sarah, this one's daughter, and Tommy's grandniece. I grew up downstairs from Tommy. I'm a public crier, by the way. That's just like, if you haven't hung out with me, it's just something that happens to me, so I'm good with it. and you will learn to be good with it. So Tommy, I think in my entire 38 years of knowing her, only cried in front of me like 3 or 4 times. They were very disconcerting moments in my life, but she saw me cry a lot. It's what I do. So I grew up upstairs from her, and it was actually only when we were going through the biography that so many people contributed to that I realized that LaSalle Street for her was really a continuation of what she has done and what she had done her whole life to extend family and to create larger homes. And 2G was just a stop for me, as I maybe leaving the apartment or coming back. It was a place to check in before the day or when the day was over. For my mom, it was, sorry. I'm good. It was a place where Tommy taught her a lot. My mother was terrible with money. Not everybody knows that. Now you do. And Tommy loved doing work with her, which was like sitting there with all of her credit card bills and like making sure that she paid them on time and like moving money around. And as Tommy got older, and especially after Hy died, they had daily coffees where my mother would bring coffee down to Tommy because she didn't like Tommy's coffee. And that kitchen table is it's where I spent most of my time with Tommy, although there are other places and trips. It's where, as a little kid, I watched her blow smoke rings. She was amazing at it. She could blow a chain of smoke rings and the ring could go through, like other ones. She was masterful. She started smoking when she was 12, so she had a lot of practice. It's where we had big fights, and it's where I was finally allowed to play Scrabble, not just look up words, that was my task until I was about 9. And it's where also, towards the end of her life, where I sat with her and helped her out with credit card bills. And, Tommy wasn't the most sentimental person outwardly, but she loved seeing things come full circle, and she liked, she was born in 1919, my dad was born in 49, I'm born in 79. She loved that we were all 30 years apart. And when we were working on the credit cards, she looked up at me and she's like, I did this for your mom, and now you're doing it for me. And she was happy about that. There wasn't anything about giving up control. I think, actually, if anything, it was a demonstration of how much control she had over my education, and the fact that I have not inherited my mother's terribleness with money was really about her, and I think she took pride in that. I also think, like Tommy, Jenny Romaine says, we are our mother's envelopes, whatever that is, like we carry people forward inside of us. And I have lots of Tommy in me. When I was a little kid, I used to call people Zos as an insult, as it's a Scrabble word, Z-O, only admissible in certain games. It's in Webster's second. It's a cross between a Himalayan yak and a common cow. Now they do. I also know an AI is a 3-toed sloth. These are things that I know from Tommy. I also, Tommy's 2 things, just so everybody knows this and can bring this forward with them. If there is a new relationship, Tommy's 2 things are like, is the sex good, and do you know how to fight? Those were her big questions, so do with that what you will. And in a kind of moment of just coming full circle, towards the end of Tommy's life, she started to feel a little bit bad about all of the collecting that she was doing. And But she wasn't one to throw things out, so she would kind of take things that had been given to her and then try to give them back. So I was given a huge file of letters, and included is actually a birthday card that my mom wrote to Tommy. I'm going over my 2.5 minutes, sorry, Bill. In 1997, so it's 20 years ago. And so I'll just, I tried to practice this at home, and this happened every time. I thought maybe there would be some miracle that it wouldn't, but there's a lesson in there, but I'm not learning it. All right, so here we go. To dearest Tommy, from whom I learned the connection between politics and the kitchen, from whom I have received priceless friendship and support, adult mothering, good sound advice, sensible editing of the verbal and the written, understanding gin rummy and Scrabble lessons, and hours of excellent misspent time, hard-headed lessons, the sweetest corn, the warmest fires, shared nachas in our girl, shared Surus in particular moments, pre-dawn hospital runs, there shouldn't be many more, toop toop too, with love and esteem in celebration of all your years. So, thank you.
Did anybody ever go into Tommy's refrigerator? It was a minefield. Because Chaim and Tommy had a deep-seated respect for food and a fear of hunger and a knowledge of what it was like in the old country when you didn't have anything to eat. So they'd never throw anything out. And I just remember that Tommy always loved food. She'd shut her eyes, remember? She'd just shut her eyes and go, And there was good food, and then there was better food for Tommy. I've known Tommy my whole life. She was there when I was born. And so there's really too much to tell, but I kind of distilled it to try and say some things that maybe you don't know. Tommy was always Tamachki in our family. That was our name for her. And she was a quiet architect, making things happen. My family was loud and combative, and I would have loved her just for her peaceful demeanor if that had been all. She'd come in and she could keep her mouth shut, and that was really amazing to me. I remember her before she started asking questions. When I was young, she did not ask questions. Instead, she was the photographer. This is how she avoided giving herself away. She didn't have, like when you ask questions, right, you don't give yourself away. Well, when you take pictures. So she was always there, all these great pictures, and very few of her, because she was always the one who took them. And for me, she and later Chaim worked hard to counter the negative effects of bourgeois limitations of my suburban environment. They got me a subscription to the Almanac Singers. I got a seasonal record that came in the mail filled with Pete Seeger and Ronnie Gilbert and Tom Glazer and all the great American folk singers. It gave me hope. She took me to Native American festivals all over Chicago. She took me to overnights at 1514 South Albany. And she actually cooked. She cooked great fried chicken before she decided to lose weight. And that fried chicken was always great, better cold than hot. Well, and she put me in bed with Roderick Nesbitt. You're always with Roderick. I always slept with Roderick. And I guess she had something in mind that Roderick and I would become pals, and it worked. And I gained a whole slew of amazing, wonderful cousins, loving and dynamic people, many of whom are here today, unlike anybody that I would have met in my neighborhood in Skokie, Illinois, or in my school. And I love the fact that I had all these great cousins, because the cousins that I had through other people weren't so ay, but these were great cousins. Tommy had great personal self-control and willpower. She stopped smoking when she decided to. She decided to lose 40 pounds, and she kept it off. In later years, she embraced physical exercise and PT, and she did it all quietly, without bragging, no preaching. She'd just take care of it. It was her personal business. She wasn't that interested in herself. It was always the other person who interested her. And that characterized all her relationships. And that's how High and she made friends with people of all nationalities and all ages. Look at this room. You know, I do this for a living. And when I usually have a service like this for a 98-year-old woman, usually they have very few people connected to them at the end. You know, their friends are gone, their relatives are gone, the grandchildren or the cousins or can't come in, you know, they're in school in Skidmore or whatever. I come in for that, no. I wouldn't make you do that, darling. And it's usually, you know, a very small, not Tommy, because Tommy was an architect. She was always interested in people, and people came in because she was always so interested in you, and she was brilliant at that. She was cool. She worked at her relationships. This regular stream of news articles that we used to get in the mail, and then luckily, for the sake of trees, we got them by email, which was much better. But it loudly speaks to that. I recall her lovely battles with bureaucracy, conducted by mail, with surprisingly regular success. She and I, for example, got the power company to build them a driveway and a total remake of the road up at the hill when one of their trucks inadvertently knocked down a small part of the stone to the hill. Okay? Then the guy comes out, and Chaim does the and Tommy does the and next thing you know, the guy says, it's kind of nice up here. Here we go. And they dig him a whole driveway going up the hill, 500 feet up the hill. They rebuild this. They dig a culvert, all in this quiet, one-on-one way. Tommy was unique. She had no biological children of her own due to early menopause, but she had a gaggle of offspring all the same. And she is, I think, among the last of a passing generation. That particular generation of progressive intellectuals fighting for labor unions against fascism and McCarthy, politically active all through their lives. Intellectuals, but far from effete. I know that, for example, Tommy and I took freighters to Europe so they could eat with the crew. When they took me camping, we used to sleep underneath the picnic tables. On the ground with the mosquito netting, because this is, why be fancy when you can do this? And I believed it absolutely. Eating apples and sausage, and this was fine. This was fine for me. I didn't see any problem. I still don't. But they weren't going to be bourgeois. They knew what was important, and they made sure that they lived that way. They fought the good fight, and they made the world better. They inspired younger activists and made the world know that we weren't the first people to understand how the world needs to be changed. I remember as a high school kid in Chicago, I used to go to demonstrations in Washington and meet them there. And this was before cell phones. And I always met them at the Mayflower Hotel or at the Washington Monument. How can you do that? Have you know how big the Washington Monument is? We didn't even set the time. I always met them. I don't know. God was involved. I must be amazing. I just assumed at that age that these things were natural. She's the last of an entire generation in my immediate family, the very last of that generation. And I'm so grateful to have had so many years with her. Good night, sweet Tamachki. May flights of angels attend thee to thy rest.
I'm Donna Katzen, and my father, Sam, was Tommy's first cousin. Their mothers were sisters. And my cousin Judy, who I grew up with, used to know that Tommy was, hands down, the best cousin in the family. She would come to visit us on Friday night at my grandmother's house when grown-ups would be in the other room talking about grown-up things, and Judy and I would be in the back, and Tommy would always come to us, and she would play with us. And even then, she asked us more questions than we could ever answer. But she taught us how to ask questions, and we knew that she was the best. We also never considered her a grown-up. So when Tommy moved to New York, I completely lost her. I didn't know. I was a kid. I didn't know where she went. To my detriment, I didn't ask, and nobody thought to tell me. And so I didn't know until years later when my friend Prexy reconnected us and let us know in New York that she was living about 30 blocks from me. And I had gone about 40 years without knowing anything about her. And so I was completely blessed with rediscovering her and rebuilding this relationship as grown-ups, both of us, more or less, most of the time. And she taught me many, many lessons, but one of which was her indomitable, unquenchable curiosity and courage, and that each day we decide to live again. And so, 2 poems for Tommy. One, and this may speak to others as well. The Last Mother. My last mother is gone, the one who really heard. You measured the ache in my step with yours, took the pulse of my dreams. You made a place for me each week where our only business was asking, listening. Your agenda hinged on broken gadgets to mend, envelopes to mail, records to sort, pictures to hang, mine exhuming family and the fabric of your days, interrupted by an undotted cardinal at the window and the unannounced visit of an errant memory. Childless, you took up the mantle of mothering, weaving tapestries with torn threads abandoned by other hands, believing in me when I did not believe in myself. Before you slipped away, you were the only one who waited for me. And this is a true incident, Tommy's toenails. Paint them fire engine red, she orders. At 97, her 10-foot soldiers, each with its own battle plan, have scattered far beyond her reach, but not beyond her command. I prop the veteran metatarsals, seasoned souls that have pounded pavements and picket lines, moved in tenants at midnight, stood between black families and armed white neighbors. They have slowed, but they're not stopping. With hesitation, I apply the polish, take care to stay within the cuticles, but she resists restriction, says, put on, calls her tireless troops to wear their true colors, unfurl their undefeated flags, fiery flamenco, rebel red. I wield the tiny brush like a wand, transform the 10 unregimented warriors of all statures, shapes, sizes, angles, and attitudes into a ragtag army of glory, ready to do battle one more time. Today, I know that wherever I join the rank and file, hungry, homeless, landless, nationless, nameless people who write their destinies with shoeless songs in the wind, these feet will march with me.
We're closing with a list of letters that requesting contributions from nonprofits that have arrived in Tommy's mail since she died. And you can stop me at 3 minutes. ACLU, American Diabetes Association, American Friends Service Committee, American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, American Sephardi Federation, Anti-Defamation League, Children's Defense Fund, CSPI, Nutrition Action Health, Defenders of Wildlife, Doctors Without Borders, Earth Justice, Elizabeth Warren for Massachusetts, Environmental Defense Fund, FINCA International, Fountain House, Friends of Green Chimneys, Galapagos Conservancy, Grassroots International, Greenpeace, Habitat for Humanity, International Planned Parenthood Federation, Iraq Veterans Against the War, Madre, Museum at Eldridge Street, Museum of Modern Art, Museum of the City of New York, NAACP, National Museum of African American History and Culture, National Trust for Historic Preservation, National Wildlife Federation, National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne, Natural Resources Defense Council, Nature Conservancy, New York Public Radio, NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council, NYU Gift Processing Center, Oxfam, Partners in Health, PBS, People for the American Way, Planned Parenthood, Public Citizen, 2 of them have come, Rainforest Alliance, Riverkeeper, Rosenberg Fund for Children, Save the Redwoods League, Sierra Club, Smithsonian, Friends of Smithsonian, Channel 13, Trust for Public Land, United Negro College Fund, UNICEF, United Farm Workers of America, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, University of Chicago Office of Gift Planning, War Resisters League, Waterkeepers Alliance, Wilderness Society, WNET, Women for Women International, and WSHU Public Radio. This list, so this is since she died May 13th, and I think that it expresses the broadness and the ethical power of Tommy. Thank you.
In my family, somebody who was religious was considered a genetic mistake. But they tolerated me well. And there are 2 traditional prayers that are said at a service such as this. The first one is the Almolei Rachamim, in which you recite someone's name and you basically commend them to heaven. There's a folk belief that when the Almolei is said the first time, the gates of paradise open and the soul goes through. I'm sure that Tommy got it there much quicker than we are, but that's the first thing that we're going to do. So it's traditional to stand for this. If you guys want to do that, I'm going to ask you to do it. Malay Rachamim Shochem Bamromim Amsem Nuchano Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utarim Kizan Anaki Amazirim Et Nishma Tamaara Bat Ben Zion V'mina Shelcha Le'olama Began Eden Tehem Menuchata Anabal רחמים, אז תראה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, ותנוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן, amen. And the other prayer that we're going to do is the Kaddish. Now, you all got copies of the Kaddish card when you came in? Okay. For those of you who this is not your religion and this is not necessarily a meaningful experience, I'll tell you that the Kaddish was translated into Greek and paraphrased back into English as the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, etc. So while we're doing the Kaddish, you can recite the Lord's Prayer to yourself and we'll just be in sync perfectly. The Kaddish says that the passing of the world's history is in complete accord with the intentions of God. What an optimistic view. At times of loss, this is an impossible statement to get behind. So Judaism says at your time of loss, you have to recite the Kaddish. At your time of doubt, for the sake of those whom you lose, you have to assert your belief in the future. And Tommy had a strong belief in the future. So, the Kaddish or the Lord's Prayer, take your choice. Okay? Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma tivrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kori v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba b'varach le'olam u'l'almei almayom, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitrumam v'yitnasei, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudisho b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'bromav hu ya'asei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'ar b'leit Zion v'Yerushalayim. May God in mercy send peace to all who mourn, even in Zion and even in the gates of Jerusalem. Let's say amen. Amen. Okay, you can all sit down. We're going to take a minute now for private reflection, and this is a good time maybe to relive some experiences that you had with Tommy. You know, all these things you were remembering, all these experiences that you were remembering with Tommy, the door never closes on these things. The door is always open. So let's enjoy that going through that way.
Everybody knows this, right? Yes. I would like to be. You must prove it, please. There once was a union maid who never was afraid of goons and the ginks and the company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the union hall when a meeting it was called, and when the union boys came round, she always stood her ground.
Oh, you can't scare me, I sing with the union.
I sing with the union. I sing with the union.
Oh, you can't
much.